The first time I heard the name, Project Sundial, I was sitting in the back corner of a faded library just outside of Barstow, California. A man in his 60s, clearly drunk or haunted or both, told me he worked at a desert shadow site during the early 90s. He leaned in close, reeking of cigarettes and secrets, and said, "They're still moving time out there, still measuring light like its currency." I laughed awkwardly. He didn't. Instead, he handed me a yellowed folder and said, "They erased us, son. We're echoes now." I didn't sleep that night. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy peeling back the layers of forbidden knowledge. These stories don't just entertain, they reveal. And trust me, this one might follow you into your dreams. The folder the man gave me was thin but strange. Inside were photocopied memos with blacked out names, a few blurry photos of desert facilities, and a map with the word Sundial circled in red ink near Groom Lake, Nevada. At first glance, I thought it was just another Area 51 conspiracy, but then I found a code, Sol 1187. When I cross-referenced it online, I found only one hidden internal index inside a declassified Air Force weather manipulation report. But Sol 1187 was never mentioned in the document itself, just listed, as if it had been redacted before it was ever written. I became obsessed. I started with FOIA requests. Nothing came back. Then I reached out to old military contractors who'd worked in the Nevada test range from the 80s to the early 2000s. Most ignored me. One replied briefly, "Don't ever use that word in writing again," it said. No greeting, no name. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I felt like I was chasing something buried in dry earth, just beneath reach, something humming under layers of heat and silence. After months of digging, I finally found a name, Dr. Evelyn Hart. She had once been a physicist at Sundial National Laboratories, specializing in solar radiation studies and applied chronophysics, a term I'd never seen before. Her work was abruptly terminated in 1999. No reason listed. I found her living alone in a cabin in northern Idaho. It took me 3 days to convince her to talk. When she did, her voice shook. "Sundial wasn't about measuring time," she whispered. "It was about bending it." Evelyn claimed the project began in 1983 under the Strategic Defense Initiative umbrella, Reagan's infamous Star Wars program. But instead of focusing on space-based lasers, Sundial focused on solar anomalies. "They found something in the light," she said. "A frequency that shouldn't exist. Something that caused clocks to skip. Only slightly. Microseconds. But always forward." She said they built massive heliometric devices in the desert, machines that tracked and manipulated sunlight with precision. Not for energy, not for climate studies, but to test whether solar input could create controlled temporal distortions in a localized area. The facility, officially known as Site E77, wasn't marked on any map. According to Evelyn, it was buried beneath the desert near Yucca Flat, disguised as a nuclear test relic. She described it as a sprawling underground compound with a central chamber known as the corridor. This was where the experiments happened. "They called it folding the day," she said. "We weren't traveling through time. We were shortening it, cutting seconds off reality, like trimming the edges of a film reel." I asked her why. Why would anyone want to shorten time? Her answer chilled me. "Control," she said. "If you can alter the flow of time in microbursts, you can create unpredictability in systems, cause desynchronization in enemy tech, scramble clocks, confuse satellites." It was tactical at first, but then the test started showing something unexpected. People inside the corridor, after exposure, they'd have memories of events that never happened, conversations they couldn't have had. It was as if alternate versions of time were bleeding through. The military shut the project down in 1998 after what she called the 44-second event. She refused to tell me the details at first, but the way she looked out the window as she spoke, I could tell she still saw it. Even decades later, one of the researchers came out of the corridor babbling in Russian, she said. His name was Joshua Lehman, born in Ohio, never spoke a word of Russian before, and he kept saying a name, Vremya B, time B, a second timeline. I left Idaho with more questions than answers. The documents Evelyn provided were partial scans, diagrams of a strange, spiraling mechanism labeled HC array, and a log entry dated July 19, 1997. Subject appears disoriented. Reports seeing dual shadows. Blood crystallizing at edge of skin under intense light. No memory of ray entry. The phrase, ray entry, appeared often. I started to wonder, were they leaving? I returned to Nevada and tracked down a former security contractor who claimed to have worked at E77 under a false company name, Chronoshield. His name was Marcus, and he met me at a diner outside Tonopah. I showed him one of the corridor diagrams. He looked at it for a long time and said, "We called it the Sundial because it cast shadows that moved in the wrong direction." Then he told me about the hole. Marcus described a section of the corridor one that wasn't on the official blueprints. Sometimes, during high exposure phases, a part of the floor would vanish. Not physically, but visually, like a blind spot. People who stepped into it didn't always come back. He paused. And if they did, they weren't the same. He showed me a photo on his phone, grainy, distorted but unmistakably. A man with no irises, just black. That was Lehman. 3 days before he disappeared again. I dug deeper, found archived seismic readings from 1997 that showed unexplained microquakes near Yucca Flat, exactly when the tests were allegedly happening. I also found FAA flight anomalies, planes being rerouted for solar interference at precise windows. Something was affecting navigation systems. Something real. What frightened me most, though, was the presence of a private company named Sol Invictus Labs. In all the documentation, they'd funded energy measurement tools used in the project, but I could find no trace of them now. No website, no filings, no tax records. They simply vanished after 2000. And then I got the letter. The letter arrived without a return address. Plain white envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a printed sentence, no header, no signature. "You're looking in the wrong direction. The light doesn't bend, it splits." Beneath that was a set of GPS coordinates pointing to a dead zone in the desert, just 12 miles southwest of Mercury, Nevada. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment seemed off just slightly, like it knew more than I did. I rented a Jeep and drove out at dawn. The coordinates led me to a rusted fence in the middle of nowhere. No markings, just a no trespassing sign bleached by decades of sun. Beyond it, buried in sand, was a concrete hatch half covered by a tarp. No lock. I opened it. The air that escaped was stale and metallic. I descended into darkness, one rung at a time, for nearly 40 feet. At the bottom was a corridor, cold, humming, and lined with copper panels etched with symbols I didn't recognize. But the strange part, the air moved backward. It felt like standing in front of a fan, sucking in. I wandered through a maze of empty halls, abandoned terminals, broken cameras. Then I found it. A large, circular chamber with a raised platform and a dish-like structure at its center. The HC array. It looked like a sundial with no shadow. My watch stopped working. My phone glitched, rebooting over and over. In the silence, I heard what I thought were whispers. But when I turned, no one was there. Just shadows cast by no visible light source. I managed to take photos before I felt an intense wave of nausea. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to stretch, then collapse in on themselves. I stumbled back up the ladder and collapsed outside, vomiting onto the desert floor. For a moment, the sun above me appeared. Split. 2 suns, one pale, one gold, hovering for half a second before merging back into one. I thought I was hallucinating, but the photos I took showed a double lens flare. Proof? Back home, I uploaded the files to an encrypted drive. The next morning, my apartment had been broken into. Nothing stolen except my hard drives. Not even the cash on my desk was touched. Just the drives. And my physical notes? Burned. I found the ashes in my bathtub. There was no sign of forced entry, but something had been there, watching. A week later, I received an email from an anonymous address, a link to an unlisted video. The footage showed a man in a hospital room, strapped to a bed, eyes darting wildly. A nurse asks him what year it is. He says, "It's 1994, and 2023 at the same time. You don't understand. Sundial broke the sequence. It folded the calendar. The screen glitches. The man screams as light pours through a crack in the wall. Then static. I ran a trace. The IP came from Ukraine. I found out there had been a former Soviet project called Chrono Gamma, rumored to have intercepted US signals in the ADS that matched Sundial's light patterns. One name appeared in both projects, Dr. Sergei Dyatlov, former Russian physicist turned recluse. I found him living in Geneva under an alias. When I confronted him, he didn't deny anything. In fact, he seemed relieved. You know, he said. Finally, someone else knows the day has been repeating. Dyatlov claimed the Earth's rotation had been imperceptibly altered not mechanically, but temporally by the Sundial experiments. We haven't been living the same day twice, he said. We've been living between two versions of a day, and every time you feel déjà vu, that's when the timelines sync. He handed me a notebook filled with erratic scribbles and time equations. One phrase repeated over and over: the sun doesn't rise, it resets. At this point, I started noticing changes in my own life, subtle ones. I'd walk into a room and find things misplaced. I'd wake up with bruises I didn't remember getting. I got emails from people I didn't know referencing conversations I never had. I thought I was losing my mind, until one night, at 3:44 a.m., phone rang. No caller ID. A child's voice whispered, "You were inside the corridor too long." Then silence. I revisited the desert site weeks later. The hatch was gone, filled in, erased like it never existed. The ground above was smooth, new, and dry. But just beneath the surface, I found something metal. A shard. I took it home, ran tests. It had isotopic ratios that didn't match anything found in this region of the Earth. It was as if it had been exposed to solar radiation, on a different timeline. My final breakthrough came from a retired NASA engineer. She emailed me under the name Kelt9. She claimed the Hubble Space Telescope had once picked up anomalies in solar data, shifts in solar flares that didn't correspond with known sunspot activity. But the data was buried. The sun is pulsing faster than it should, she wrote, because we nudged it just enough to ripple light through time. Sundial didn't just affect us, it affected everything. She sent me a series of graphs showing erratic solar neutrino patterns from 1997 to 2001. Look at the dips, she wrote. Those aren't natural. Those are interruptions. I compared those dips with Marcus's logbook. Every sundial experiment correlated with the neutrino fluctuation. Every time fold altered solar data itself. The implications were unthinkable. We weren't just testing time. We were rewriting it. Poorly? That's when I realized what Evelyn meant. The light splits. Every experiment didn't create a new timeline. It fractured the existing one like glass under pressure. And we've been living in those cracks ever since. Shadows that don't match the light. Choices we don't remember making. The unshakable feeling that something's off. That we were meant to wake up from this day, but never quite do. So here's the truth. Project Sundial was real. Its effects may still be active, and you've probably felt them. Every moment of déjà vu, every misremembered memory, every glitch in your daily rhythm, those aren't coincidences. They're echoes of a timeline that was sliced, folded, and resealed. But imperfectly, and the scar remains. Now, every time I close my eyes, I see the corridor. I hear Joshua Lehman screaming in Russian. I see a second sun blinking in the sky like a warning. I don't know if this video will reach many people before it's taken down, but if you're really watching, then you've felt it too. That subtle shift, that quiet wrongness in the air, and you're not crazy, you're just awake. They say the truth will set you free, but some truths don't free you. They bind you tighter to questions, to obsessions, to realities that don't quite align. The truth behind Project Sundial isn't just a story. It's a fracture we all live in, a tear in the hourglass. So the next time you look at the sun, ask yourself, which version of the day are you living in right now? If you made it this far, thank you. Some stories aren't meant to end, just echo. If you want more like this, hit subscribe. Let's keep digging together.